Please welcome to the stage Erica Williams, Jessica Matthews, Natasha Bowens, and Vikrum Aiyer.
Hello, everyone. Is this on? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah. Good, good. So excited to be here today. I just got here. I ran from a convening that has a bunch of legendary civil rights activists, some of the original founders of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, CORE, all these amazing legendary activists. And one of them pulled me aside as I was on my way out, and I told her what the panel was about that I was coming to moderate. And she said, "You don't understand how lucky you are and how lucky your generation is to be able to make a living off of your passions, to be able to make a living off of making the world a better place. That's a rather new phenomenon." And I looked at her and I said, yes, it is easier now than it has ever been, but that doesn't mean it's easy. And so that's what this panel is about. It's going to be talking through some of the challenges, some of the barriers. We're going to try to stay away from cliches. A lot of these conversations I've sat in before, and people just say, follow your dreams and reach for the stars. That's great, that's wonderful, I believe it, it feels good. But there's some real practical challenges, or at least practical questions, that I'm sure many of you have. And so since we don't have time for Q&A during this session, I'm going to pretend I'm you. And I'm going to ask my amazing, brilliant, smart panelists today questions that I think are pretty common in figuring out how do you actually make social change and social good your full-time job and a career. So as was mentioned, to my immediate left is Jessica Matthews. She's the co-inventor and CEO of sOccket and Uncharted Play, her new company called Uncharted Play, and I'll let them tell you a little bit more about what they do. To her left is Vikrum Aiyer. He is the senior speechwriter and communications advisor for the Office of the Secretary and Undersecretary of Commerce. Big, impressive title. And then all the way on the end, last but certainly not least, my former colleague during my Campus Progress days, now a sustainable farmer, Natasha Bowens. So I'm going to jump right in and ask you guys, I guess, the most basic question. Briefly, what do you all do, and how did you get there? And I'll start with you, Jessica.
Hey, everybody. This is going to be a contest in speed talking, so try to just stay with us. Let us know if we start going too fast. My name is Jessica Matthews. I'm 23 years old, and I am an inventor. I think it's the coolest thing to be able to say that, so it's all very Bill Nye, so I love to put it out there. And essentially, I started out in college without any engineering background, went with a bunch of girls, and we invented something called the sOccket. I brought an old prototype here. It's essentially a soccer ball that harnesses the power of play while you're playing with it, stores it like a portable generator that can then be used to power small electrical appliances that are critical to the developing world. Thanks. Yeah, my parents like it too. So, you know, the idea for us, we notice we don't want to try to fix all the energy problems. We simply want to address them, raise awareness about the global energy problems. But specifically, we wanted our means of addressing this problem to be fun. And I think that says a lot about our generation. I can't stand to be bored. And I don't think that your life needs to be a constant reminder of what you lack. So when we came up with the sOccket, the idea wasn't to be better than all the hand cranks and other things like that, but to be fun. To say, why can't the minute you try to start to address the problems you have, why can't that be something that can boost your happiness? And in that same vein, empower you to start thinking why not versus why, and make these people in these resource-poor communities agents of change in their own lives. So fast forward a few years, and I founded a company with my one of the co-inventors named Julia Silverman called Uncharted Play, and I now run an innovative play company where we produce fun products and services that address real-world issues.
That's awesome, awesome. Vikram, what do you do?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Vikrum Aiyer. I'm 25 years old. I'm from California, and like many of you, yes, throw it up, throw up the west side. I think, like many of you, I majored in political science in college and thought that the next step, the natural next step, was law school. And somewhere along the way, I came out to D.C. and I worked on the Hill for a little while, and I just got this feeling in me, this itch that I just kept wanting to scratch, and I started to work on issues that I really enjoyed, not in a glamorous way, but I was part of a team. And I think that I started to realize that when I had a moment that there was something else drawing me away from a natural path like law school, I was willing to take a leap of faith on an idea. And I know that sounds generic, but if you ever have those moments, all of us, us included, we're still young, so don't shy away from taking something, even if it doesn't sound as concrete or guaranteed as law school. So I actually abandoned that path and came to DC to work for a couple of different politicians as well as political organizations, and that's how I got to where I am now. And I have to say, every now and then my parents try to forward me articles from AOL or Encarta. I don't know why they're still using Encarta, but about the price differential in salary and things like that, about my career choice. And I'll say this, you're going to face moments where there's differences in terms of payment, and you're going to have to make really intense financial decisions. But if you have that feeling, just be willing to take a leap of faith on it.
That's great. I'm really, really excited to be back. I used to work here and used to take naps in the back of this room here after working 24/7 shifts leading up to this conference, so I'm really, really happy to be back here. But yeah, I'm Natasha. I'm 28 years old. I'm based out of New York now, and I am a farmer.
New York. I'm from New York. New York people.
And sometimes I have to repeat myself. Say, what? I'm a farmer. I grow food. I'm a young farmer. I'm a female farmer. And I'm a brown farmer. Thank you. Now, I put emphasis on those things because, agriculture is so lost. It's so distant. It's so far from our minds. Everyone's minds. Even though we all eat food, it's become a lost art. It's become a lost place of work. I mean, even recently, there are discussions picking up speed around how we grow our food with the organic food movement, the locavore food movement, even food justice, which is just the fancy progressive way of saying everyone should have a fair slice of this food movement pie. Even within all of these movements, there's still this niche of voices that are not being heard. There's still very old issues within the food system that make people really uncomfortable, like racism in the food system, right? When we're talking about fair food distribution, when we're talking about who has access to farmers markets, who's getting the loans, the same loan as their neighbor farmer. So all of these issues are still sitting in the dark, and it's really, if you really want to follow your food, I really feel it's important to go right to the root of our food system, our ancestral farming traditions of our people. Practices that were here way before the permaculture movement picked up, right? Women farmers, who make up 80% of farmers worldwide. And brown farmers, people of color farming, who also hold the dual titles of being in the majority of farmers worldwide, but also having the shittiest end of the stick in this global agriculture business. So those are really the issues that were calling to me as an environmental activist, as a health activist, and as just a person of color who wanted to get my crunchy on and get connected with the land. I was like, where are all the brown people at, So, so that's kind of what I focus on outside of growing food on a day-to-day basis. Upstate in New York with a collective farming group, we grow 108 different varieties of food on 3.5 acres of land, so we do grow intensively and sustainably. But I also do write about these issues, race and food. I write on my blog, Brown Girl Farming. I write for environmental and farming publications, and it's why I started this initiative called The Color of Food, where we're really trying to raise the voices of farmers of color and food initiatives led by people of color.
That's great. So I want to kind of ask you all, and Vikram, you kind of spoke to it very directly, but I want to get everyone else to talk about it, is where is that moment? What was that moment that kind of helped you transition from maybe a traditional path, whether it was law school, medical school? Natasha, I know you were actually working in kind of traditional environmental organizing. When was that moment? But more importantly, how did you make the decision? Like really practically, because I often hear people talk about and then one morning I woke up and I decided to do it. And my brain doesn't work like that. Right? My brain actually starts thinking about how am I going to live? How am I going to pay my bills? What is my mama going to say? So I want you all to talk about how you made the transition, no matter how early it was, no matter how late it was. What was that moment like, and what was the decision-making process?
I think for me it was, I'm going to be realistic. So this ball wasn't invented because I wanted to change the world. It was invented because I didn't want to fail my class, which is serious shit when you have Nigerian parents. I wanted to live, okay? So I'm sitting down, I'm like, I don't even know, like a junior at Harvard, and we first wanted to create a system of mobile health records, and our professor during the midterm said, meh, like this, he said, meh. And I was like, I just wrapped my whole group together. I was like, we're going to figure this thing out. And I locked this in a room, and we pushed, and we came out with this crazy thing called the sOccket. None of us were engineers, and we sat down and said, yeah, it'll work. Yeah, physics. Yeah, high school. Yeah, it'll work. We know how it's going to work. No engineers believed us. So we literally had to Wikipedia, thank you, Jesus, for the internet, Faraday principle and everything, and then build it ourselves. And then go to the engineers and say, see, and then all the engineers said, oh. For me, the moment when I realized this is something I should do with my life came when I saw the change in people the minute I showed them the ball. I don't care if you're 50 or 5. You go to these communities and you say, first of all, I'm going to give you a ball, as in not a bottle cap or whatever you've been kicking around before. I'm going to give you a solid ball, an eco-friendly ball, everything. And then, by the way, after 15 minutes, you get 3 hours of light. And they just say, what? And all of a sudden, the way they view function and the way they assume the world should be, it just changes. They immediately start to question the status quo. And within 20 minutes, they go from awe to, yeah, your ball's great, but actually I have all these other ideas. This inspiration that comes out of it, I was like, it's one thing to say you want to be an innovator. It's another thing to inspire innovation. And I truly believe this is generation innovation. And I hate the idea of people imposing change versus someone coming out and being the change. And when I realized that it could do that and that it was so much fun, and I love fun, I love seeing people happy, I was like, I want the world to be a better place, and if I have to, let me be the person who gets it done. And I mean, to say that it was a moment of change, I mean, like I said, I'm only 23. We'll see what happens. In 20 years, I might still be doing a boring job, but the time is now to get things done and see what I can do.
And I think that's really important to talk about the job piece because as we know, and I'm sure I haven't even looked at the entire agenda, but if you haven't already, you will be talking about more today what the impact of the recession has been on particularly our generation, our job prospects, the availability. So that's an interesting piece to think about when I look at both you, Vikrum, and Natasha. Where are the jobs around kind of what it is that you want to do, and when none existed, or if they didn't exist, how did you create them? So Vikrum, go back and talk about that moment and how you look at the landscape of your field.
Yeah, so for me, I think there were probably 2 defining moments. One was, it's obvious we're at a time where you can communicate in a million different ways. There are so many different mediums that I'm sure are in most of the palms of your hands today, and I noticed that sometimes in high school, if I would geek out for a moment and talk to my friend passionately about some issue we were discussing on the debate team, if I would talk to somebody who didn't really care, they would say, wow, where did you get that information? Or how do you know all that? Or just kind of stare at me blankly and be like, why are you such a nerd? But when I was thinking about those issues, these are everyday issues that aren't that difficult to realize, they're just difficult to tackle, right? Global warming, you can rap about it and explain the problem. Abortion, the fundamental conflict there, you can pretty easily see 2 binary sides to the issue, but then once you try to address it, it gets harder. So expressing the issue and getting people to care about those issues, I saw to be a huge challenge, because sometimes I would talk to somebody who didn't even want to know about it, and if I found a compelling way to make them care, then I got a little excited about that. So I actually work in my job to frame the messages of the administration currently to talk about certain issues related to intellectual property rights and innovation and the trade that comes from the country about that. So my desire to make sure that there was an easy, identifiable, and relatable way for people to just start caring about what I thought was really what drove me to it. And I think that the landscape is, it's kind of interesting because as a speechwriter, no one says I'm going to go to school for speechwriting. There are many different paths to get there, and there's no finite direction. So, you can look in the circle of communications jobs out there, or you can look in the circle of working on the Hill as an assistant to maybe a press secretary, or you can even start somewhere completely outside of the realm of Washington and just work to articulate a cause or a passion or an advocacy. But I think what I learned most and how I got to where I am now is, honestly, to just keep hustling. You have to talk to everybody around you that you think might be even remotely related to a passionate area or even remotely related to what you want to pursue. For me, that started by trying to reach out to speechwriters, but it also started by looking out, okay, maybe there's an interesting ad I saw on the Metro by BET or by the state of Virginia. Can I literally Google anybody who works in media or in communications over there and ask them about how they got to where they were? I mean, there's a reason why Rick Ross's rap song is a chart topper, Every Day I'm Hustling, because you cannot stop talking to everyone that's around you until you actually are able to tap the resources that you want. So I feel like if you're going after jobs, be talking among one another, get my card, and I'm happy to sit down with you, but it really does begin by identifying areas where you think people can be useful and reaching out to them and not being afraid to actually talk to them about how they got to where they got and how you can get to where you want to go.
Tasha, in your answer, can you talk a little bit, when you talk about your moment or how you made the decision to transition into farming, can you talk a little bit about the economics of it? Because one of the most common concerns that I know many people have, and that I even had myself when transitioning into like a social change career, was, we don't all have parents that can fund, us figuring out what we want to do. Many of us worked multiple jobs in school, many go to community college. So there's often, when you talk about innovation and you talk about social change, there's often this picture painted that it's only for the privileged, and that it's only for those that can afford the luxury of living their passions and their dreams. So talk about the economics of your decision.
Definitely, and it's interesting that you bring that up, because for me, my answer would be, I was on this path of going into for-profit industry. So when I was in college, I was not sitting here where you all are sitting right now. I was on my diploma, get my picket fence, get my Mercedes track. Because that was like that was what was around me. That was what we were all driven to confine into. So my moment where, I won't talk specifically about how I got into farming, just because we all have our issues and we can all say, this is what's calling to me and this is why I chose to go here. But specifically, this is a panel on careers and social change. Taking that leap of getting into a field where it might be privileged to work for social change, or you're not going to make no money working in social change, getting the courage to go after that for me was just a really simple question. It was I might be preaching to the choir, but I want to bring this up just because I think it's something that you still have to keep in mind when doing work, social change work. Putting that question is, am I putting my energy into building wealth for the handful of people at the top of this capitalistic food chain that we have? Am I putting my energy into building even my own resume? There's that fear of not making money, of what's your mama gonna say, but it's not about your individual goals. And you have to remember that in working for social change. This isn't about, how many media hits I can get because I did this for these people. This is about the people. It's called social change for a reason. Social is the people. So if you're ready to jump off that cliff for the people are going to catch you every time. And so that's kind of like what keeps me warm at night when I'm counting my pennies, particularly in farming. There's not a lot of money there, but there can be if the people come together. And I know that sounds kind of cliche, just put your heart into it and it'll all fall into place. That may not be comfort for some, but I really feel like, having that network, identifying your mentors. You talk about hustling, but it's really about building those relationships, because any social change movement that you're entering into right now, there were people there before you. You are not the first person to care about that issue. You are not the first person to, invent something that's going to help people. There were people there before you, and you have to find those people, talk to those people, and your cards will fall into place. And as far as the economic piece, I hope I touched on that for you, but it's really more about just finding your network and just not being scared to take that risk, because you're not going to be alone. It's a hard world out there, but you're not alone if your heart's in the right place.
That's great. Now, most of the questions thus far, I've been kind of pretending I'm in the head of someone who's afraid to take that first step or take the leap. But that's not this entire audience. I know Campus Progress people real well. There's some folks in this room who are oh no, I know what I'm doing, and I have my plan, and I have all the business cards, and I've networked, and I have my idea. So I want to talk on behalf of them for a second and ask, what are some of the common mistakes that either you all have made or you've seen people make, who are you're ready to do social change work, this is your commitment, your passion, you've got even what you need in place. What's the mistake? What's the pitfall to avoid?
I I'm just thinking about all the mistakes that, you're never going to be able to avoid all of them, but I would say the biggest thing I always tell people is that the difference between a great idea and an actual innovation is the execution. There has to be a certain sense of realism here. Do not live in the cloud saying, oh, I have these great ideas, I'm going to change the world, look at me and my super not caring about myself and other people. In the end, sometimes you have to sit down and say, this is the world that I live in. How can I work with the system a little bit so I can change the system? And in doing that, a lot of times it's like having a business mind. Even if it's a nonprofit, a successful nonprofit, a sustainable nonprofit is a business. Everything needs to be a business, and if you're going to assume that you don't have to think about those nitty-gritty details to make your idea sustainable, then it's going to fall apart. And what delayed, I know, our project when we first started in school was that it wasn't a business. It was a cute idea amongst 4 girls. And not until I sat down and I said, we need to make this a sustainable idea, and we need to think about how we're going to live and how we're going to pay people and how we're going to do the R&D that we know we want to do, did we really start to make great strides in terms of, our actual mission. So only thing I can say is, if you're working with a team, if you're working with a group, you definitely want the idea person, but you also want the person who can sit down and think through actually what's happening and what needs to happen to get you from A to B.
Mm-hmm. Vikram, Natasha?
I mean, I think that a big part of it is that you need to understand that social change, you don't wake up overnight and think, like, I'm going to change the world, right? Like, just like you said that you want to, or that you didn't make this for any particular end other than for a class project, like, you have to realize that even if you dream big, for sure. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say don't wake up and think that you can save the world, but know that that's not going to happen overnight. Social change does not come overnight, but it does come incrementally, and it comes even by having good dialogues like this today. And I know that sounds cheesy, but I think that's the first step that people can realize, because when you get those first jobs, I can only speak about kind of Washington-oriented jobs, but you might have graduated from the best universities or have, really been this top of your class or feel that you're really, have a high aptitude and high grasp of issues, but when you get there, if you're doing some remedial work, you might feel a little downtrodden and said, like, why am I not talking to the press right now about why we need to have cap-and-trade legislation? Realize that the change will come incrementally, both for the issues, and they will also come incrementally for your careers, but they will come. So I think that's not to be a deterrent. That's just to make sure that you're going to hit walls along the way, like she said. But if you know that this is what you want to pursue, and even if you don't, but you're willing to take that leap in that moment, hit those walls running as fast as you possibly can, because you're going to learn from them. And then if you work on those networks that she talked about, then you're going to learn from other people that have been in that too. So, and I think the final thing that I would just say about mistakes that could be made is that I did mention hustling. It's my favorite word. I hope it trends on Twitter right now, actually. But be out there. But I want to reiterate what she said. Really harness those relationships, because I think that sometimes you can be out there meeting people and it can feel too transactional. This is not about racking up a certain number of email addresses for you to next day say, hey, it was really nice meeting you. It's actually about cultivating that relationship, growing it, and wanting to strike a genuine and authentic tone with them in terms of how can I learn from you, and maybe we can build something where along the way you learn from me. So that mentorship model is really something that also doesn't come overnight, but if incrementally fed and nudged along, can really blossom into something amazing.
Yeah, and I just want to add 2 quick things. I mean, mistakes to me are good. If you're not making mistakes, you're not learning anything. If you're flying through and you're trying to, reach your social change ultimate career and you haven't made one mistake, there is something going on. If I'm farming and all my crops are perfect every year and everything's coming up beautiful, I'm like digging around thinking someone accidentally sprayed some herbicide around or some pesticide. I'm like, what's going on? There needs to be some mistakes. You learn from all your mistakes, so that's number 1. And number 2, like, at risk of sounding like a broken record, but it's just really, again, listening to the community. I think one big thing that it's still happening today, and even in the breakout session that I was in this morning, I kind of was hoping someone would bring it up, but it wasn't brought up, is being careful that you're not inserting yourself into a movement, into a community, and speaking for that community without speaking to that community. That happens so much. And, I started, when I got my whole, crunchy food movement moving on, and I was hopping around, I went to Detroit to farm there, and Chicago and Brooklyn, and I wasn't raised in Detroit, I was raised in the suburbs of Florida. And here I was talking about all this stuff that I was learning about food justice and food deserts, and I didn't live in a food desert with these people. So, that was my kind of humbling moment where you have to take a step back and really, I've heard this said before, when you're working in social change, you really want to be working yourself out of a job, because you want to be empowering the community that you're speaking for and speaking about and these problems that you're working towards, and hope that the people of that community then take your place and find their own solutions. So that's great.
Can I just add one thing?
Yeah.
I think that along the way, there might even be some in this room, even though this is a highly educated and interested and concerned crowd, that you might not have a job, or you might end up taking a job that you really love and you really are passionate about that falls outside of the parameter of this bubble that we're calling social change. But don't feel like if you pursue that career that like this room of people and the people that you once associated with are no longer your family, or you can no longer connect with them. Like, it is really incumbent upon all of us, since we do have all these resources and we can build faster than any way possible and farm in new ways, and we can communicate in new ways, that you challenge yourself to leverage any resource around you to still hit on those passionate issues. So if you end up becoming a lawyer, or if you end up becoming an investment banker, take a moment every now and then to think about and reflect about those issues that you once cared for, and never let them die, because you have the resources to help on the side. And the people in this room that continue on into those careers that we call social change will never shut the door on you.
I think that was a perfect way to wrap up. I'm going to ask you all one last question, but the reason I like that is because it ended in some ways where we should have started, which is what are we talking about when we say social change and social change careers? Because so many people have varying definitions of that, and I don't want any of us to limit how you all define social change. Many of us up here will have different definitions of that, but I think it's really interesting for folks to be able to understand that how you define the issues that matter to you, and how you choose to work on those, using your gifts, your talent, your resources, your networks, is completely up to you, and the sky's the limit. So I would ask each of you for a closing remark, just to tell one final piece of advice to this audience. If there was one thing that you could tell them and you only had that one thing, what would it be as they embark on careers in social change?
Wow. Can I get a quick show of hands? How many of you know specifically how you want to change the world? That's what I thought. Yeah.
Really? I'm surprised you too. That's great.
Okay, yeah. So what I can say is that, before I came into this, I'm trained in psychology and economics, and I did a lot of stuff, understanding the millennial generation, and I was like, oh, let's define it, understand who we are, what we can do. And what people say is that, we're really keen about leaving a legacy. We want to do something big, and we believe that we can because our parents told us that we're, the best of the best, whether or not it was true. For a while, I thought I was a better singer than Whitney Houston. That's not true. So what I can say for me is that, if you had asked me 4 years ago, do you know you're going to be an inventor and a social entrepreneur and someone who, goes to these communities and finds out how you can introduce these balls? No, I would have been like, what are you talking about? Like, even now, it's like, what is this ball? Like, what does it do? The fact that, it's what's happening now, I would have never guessed it 4 years ago. I would have never thought of it until I was put between a rock and a hard place, and I had all these experiences traveling, being first generation Nigerian American and seeing exactly where the need was. So all I can say is that don't be afraid to go into the unknown, as long as you have a very good idea of who you are and what you want to do. I knew that I wanted to do something. I didn't know how or what. But the how and what will come as long as you stay set on that path that you're going to do something, that you're going to make something happen. You take every single opportunity and you say, you know what, I'm not an engineer. I suck at soccer, whatever, let's see what happens. And you'll see what happens. I promise you it's going to be worthwhile.
Yeah, and I think that's a really difficult thing to sometimes express, like you mentioned in the beginning, or just sometimes we don't want to disappoint our parents. But I think social change, you can really define it on your own terms, but just don't end up disappointing yourselves. And I think that you can recalibrate what social change means. If you don't end up entering the career path or traveling down the career path that you're thinking about doing right now, you don't have to see yourself or define yourself as a sellout, right? Social change is really just a moment and understanding for you to go to sleep at night thinking like, I made just as much of an impact somewhere in the world, right? So that impact is going to constantly evolve and constantly be redefined. I work in democratic politics, and I've already seen how I felt about views when I attended this conference when I was younger change from where they are now. So my idea of social change are going to vary a little bit based off of some of those experiences that I've had. So like she said, know that there are going to be moments where you're not necessarily certain what path you want to travel down, but know that you're the one that gets to define how you're going to pursue those things on your own terms. Really remember that. And I know this, again, I don't want to keep saying it sounds cheesy, but if you keep that in mind, then you will constantly be that change that you want yourself to be.
And I know we're running out of time, but really just to second what Jessica said, I think there's so many people, I saw like 3 hands of people who knew what they wanted to do to change the world, and that's completely normal to not know that yet. But I think it's a personal journey. So here I am talking about community, and now I'm flipping the script and talking about individual. That's where it starts. You have to really, like Jessica said, know yourself, dig down. What affects you? What was your childhood? You know, what's your history? Who are your ancestors? Where did you come from? What was going on back in the day from where you came from? And really dig through who you are and what kind of calls to you, and everything else will fall in line. I really believe that, so.
Thanks, guys. I was so excited when I saw the panel lineup, and even honored and privileged that Campus Progress asked me and all of us, because I think that the key takeaway here for me is that we're all still on this path and journey, right? Like, this is not a panel of people in their 40s and 50s who have made a lot of money doing anything or who have been in this field for a long time. This is a panel of young people who are still trying to figure it out, who are still trying to live our values and figure out how to do that in a way that is authentic and true to who we are. And so that as all of you all do that, know that we're here to support you and partner with you. And we hope you enjoyed it. And I want to thank my panelists.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.